Your eyes on the times, you walk ready to speak up. But with so many problems, you're exhausted trying to keep up.
This is the Church Politics Podcast, where you can get political commentary from a biblical worldview. We're not trying to be conservative or progressive. We're trying to be Christian in the public square.
And I'm black as heaven. I'm made in God's image. Nobody can change my settings. Hey man, cut off my knees and put an end to my search. It's easy to sell your soul when you don't know what it's worth.
With your no good and Camp, you're listening to the And Campaign's Church Politics Podcast with Justin Giboney, a.k.a. Bishop Cooper's grandson, and the Windy City representative, the baddest brother above the Mason-Dixon line, my play cousin, the Right Reverend Christopher Butler. Now, if you are watching on YouTube, you've already figured out that Chris is not with me today, but we will be reuniting in Akron, Ohio, because we have a chapter in Akron, Ohio, and we're doing a live broadcast this Saturday from Akron. So check that out. You'll be able to watch it on YouTube. Check that out, and then we'll record it, and you'll hear it later on, iTunes and Spotify and all that stuff, okay? So check us out in that regard. But Chris isn't with us today, and I really want to try to make this a fairly quick episode. There's a couple things that I want to talk about that I didn't want you to have to wait for. So bear with me. We're going to get through this without Chris, but he will be back soon. He's never too far away. But as always, let me start by giving a shout out to all our patrons and supporters for supporting us in what we do and how we do it. Obviously, this is a unique podcast. The transparency, the issues we talk about and how we talk about them, I think are important for the church to hear. And imagine how many more people could hear it if you supported this through patreon.com. So if you go to patreon.com/churchpolitics, you can be a monthly giver to this program, which will allow us to reach more people with this message of compassion and conviction and looking at politics, not in a partisan or ideological way, but looking at it primarily as a Christian. Okay. If you sign up, if you become a patron, you also will get premium episodes. So for instance, in this episode, I'm going to talk about the whole controversy of Megan Thee Stallion giving a concert doing some songs at Kamala Harris's event in Atlanta, right? That's been a big issue, and I want to speak into that. But you got to be a premium supporter to hear it, all right? So help us out. We look forward to partnering with you in that regard and reaching even more Christians with our message, all right? Very important that you ride with us. All right, let's get into this. Without further ado, grab your Bible, get your mind right, and prepare to think not like a Republican, not like a Democrat, but to think like a Christian. Okay, if you listened to us last week, we talked a little bit about Project 2025. And people have been asking us, everywhere can y'all speak into this? And we haven't spoken into it, not because we don't think it's important, not because we haven't been paying attention and haven't been doing our due diligence, but because based on my perspective as somebody who doesn't support it, I thought it would be best to get somebody, a conservative who did support it or who was actually part of the coalition for Project 2025 to talk about it so that they could do it justice. And then we could have a back and forth with them. So I was making calls. I was, asking around, sending emails, trying to get somebody on, the more conservative that would align with that to talk about it. And I wasn't able to do it. I was surprised because I'm pretty resourceful when it comes to that, but I wasn't able to get anybody to come on the show. Part of the reason could be, though, that it's gotten such bad press, and now you even have Trump against it. Many of the organizations who are part of it probably are trying to separate themselves or at least be quiet, right? If you're a Trump supporter and he's saying he doesn't agree, publicly saying he doesn't agree with this particular project, you probably wouldn't want to go out and defend it, okay? I'm guessing that's what happened. Nobody told me that explicitly, but I'm trying to read between the lines because I'm usually able to pull these interviews together. I'm trying to read between the lines, and I think that's what's going on here, okay? So I wasn't able to do that. However, what I'm going to do is show you a clip from a conservative named Emily Jasinski. She is part of Breaking Points, and I recommend that as a good platform to watch. part of Talking Points more specifically. She worked for the Federalist for a while, and now she's at Unheard, which I think is another good platform. Not that you're going to agree with everybody, but I do think they do a pretty good job and give a good perspective. Emily, again, is a conservative who I have a lot of disagreements with, but I really do believe that Emily is intellectually honest and that she's working in good faith. Okay. So I'm going to give you this clip, just maybe 2.5 minutes of her explaining what she believes Project 2025 is about. And then I'll come back with my analysis. All right.
Speaking of attacks that Democrats really want to stick to Republicans, at least, should we move on to Project 2025, Crystal?
Let's do it. This is like you got to do your conservative explainer for me of what the hell's going on here.
Well, you know, it's funny because the media has constructed this amazing myth of Project 2025 that is, you know, Donald Trump himself recently said that there's some fine points in it and some, what did he say, absolutely ridiculous points in it that he doesn't agree with at all. But basically, the Heritage Foundation is the premier think tank, conservative think tank in DC. It is the biggest and most influential think tank on the right. And they've put out what's called their mandate for leadership since the 1980s. And it's like a 900-page book this cycle. Project 2025 is what they, you know, relabeled it because they also coupled it this year, which the part that, you know, if I were sitting back and going to describe anything as a vast right-wing conspiracy, they did couple it with this personnel recruitment search that a lot of conservative groups started doing and actually realized they had to start doing during the Trump administration when, you know, it's no secret the conservative movement has wanted to like gut the administrative state literally for decades. The Heritage Foundation itself attacked Ronald Reagan for not abolishing the Department of Education in the middle of the 80s. So, you know, they think they have a real shot at achieving some of this stuff with Trump. And some of it is going to be extremely unpopular with the American people. Democrats realized that and sort of took what was fairly commonplace. I mean, Heritage Foundation had been handing these books out. They still are. They were at NatCon recently. They had stacks of these big 900-page Project 2025 mandate for leadership books, just kind of handing them out. They weren't trying to be secretive about it at all. In fact, they were trying to get these books in everyone's hands. The other, if you're going to say there's a vast right-wing conspiracy element of this, is they teased a 180-day plan for the first 180 days of any Republican president who were to win in 2024. For a while, there were a lot of people in, you know, circles here in D.C., conservative circles in D.C., heritage circles in D.C. who wanted that person to be Ron DeSantis. It wasn't just about Donald Trump. So that's my basic, because there has been, to borrow a phrase, disinformation surrounding it. Some of it is fine because it's partisan attacks from Democrats that are being constructed to win an election, which is a totally normal thing that both sides do. Then when it gets kind of parroted by the media, I think is where that's confusing. But it's fairly standard stuff. At the same time, fairly standard for a conservative movement group like the Heritage Foundation is not going to be appealing on a mass scale. So that's my basic rundown before we jump into the news of what happened yesterday, Crystal.
All right, that was Emily. Again, that was Emily Jashinsky. What I'm going to do is make sure that I get that whole segment and put it in the show notes because I think you guys need to see the whole segment. Emily and Crystal Ball, who is progressive, had a really good conversation about what Project 2025 is and what it isn't after that monologue from Emily. And so I think you should watch the whole thing so you really know what's going on here from two different perspectives. All right. So check that out. But now I'll kind of give my analysis of it. And for me, when it comes to Project 2025, my first thought in reading up on it and, you know, just kind of doing my due diligence is this is dangerous. This is not the type, many of these policies are not the type of policies that I would want implemented. For instance, getting rid of the Department of Education. I truly believe that education should be local, like it should be locally controlled. Got it. But getting rid of the Department of Education removes a lot of oversight, and it takes away in many ways the ability to help some of these schools that may need some more resources and to make sure things are fair. So while you may be able to say that the Department of Education needs to be reformed, to completely get rid of it, in my opinion, is irresponsible. And there's a lot of things in there like that. I mean, they have other stuff where they're outlawing and like arresting librarians who, anybody who deals with pornography. Not a fan of that. I mean, as a Christian, I wouldn't cry over that. But those are some of the things that it has in there. The biggest issue here, though, the overriding issue here is the executive power. Okay. Because they're really seizing executive power and trying to take the reins of that in a way that I don't think has been done in a long time. And there's also an expansion of that. So I don't have a problem with somebody saying, hey, I'm the president. You voted me in. I'm over these administrative agencies. I'm over the whole executive branch. I'm going to make sure that I put people in there to do what I need them to do. I get that. But are they going to go about it in a way that removes a lot of the expertise and institutional knowledge to where you can't do it competently? That's one question that we asked last week when we had this conversation, right? And are you doing it in the spirit of democracy? The way that Project 2025, if you read through it, talks about taking over the executive branch and empowering it, sounds like it's outside the spirit of democracy, right? So are you going to go in there and be the president and an executive branch for everybody, even though surely you have your agenda? Or are you saying it's our turn now? We're completely disregarding the other side. We're going to do everything we can do to completely change everything that's going on. That doesn't sound like something, number one, that's desirable, that would be helpful for a lot of people, but it also sounds like it goes against the spirit of democracy. And that's a huge problem for me. Now, I want to say this. I do see this policy as dangerous. I see it as dangerous primarily because I disagree with the Heritage Foundation on most things, and I don't trust them to make these big changes that they're talking about. And I don't trust them with expanding executive power. Okay? But here's the question. And I know a lot of people, and what I didn't want you to do, and why I think this needs to be talked about, is I didn't want you basing your opinion on this on memes. I didn't want you running scared and being afraid and desperate based on what you've seen in memes. Because some of those memes, even though I don't agree with this project and this coalition, some of the memes that I have seen have been going too far. I think this project is dangerous. I think it's outside of the spirit of democracy and could further destabilize what's going on. And it could hurt people just like any policy. Where do you draw the line, Justin? Do you agree that, that it's this monster that's going to completely destroy democracy? Let me say this. It's dangerous and outside of democracy, the democratic spirit. I cannot honestly look at you and tell you that I saw something that would make this a dictatorship, that would completely destroy democracy, and that, that most of the policies in there were somehow unconstitutional. I did not see that. I saw policies that I dislike. I saw policies that I think will be bad for the country. I don't like how they're approaching power because, again, it's outside of the spirit of democracy. I did not see that this becomes a dictatorship and that this is Jim Crow 2.0. I'm very hesitant to ever say something like that because Jim Crow, the way that it targeted people and specifically took away people's rights, specifically said certain people can't vote and all those things, that comparison is more provocative than credible. And we have to, what we need to be able to do at this moment in our democracy, in our political landscape, is to be able to critique something, say I don't like it, but not exaggerate it to the extent that we have people thinking that the world's about to end and the country is over if some of these things are implemented. Do we see the difference? Like, are we mature enough to say that's bad, that's dangerous, I don't want that here? But it's not necessarily Jim Crow 2.0. Do we have the maturity? Are we intellectually honest enough to do that? Because I have seen some memes that all it's doing is scaring people. Is there stuff to be concerned with? Absolutely. Should we push back against this? Absolutely. I don't want that stuff implemented. I don't want a lot of those things implemented. But does this, if Trump were to win and if they were to implement some of this, does that mean there would no longer be any Black history taught? I think that's an overstatement. One of the issues that I have with one of the other issues that I have with Project 2025 is some of the groups that are part of its coalition. So you have folks like Alliance Defends Freedom. We've had some very serious disagreements with them on civil liberties for LGBTQ people, right? But I've also seen them come to the aid of pastors who are being attacked by the far left. I know people of color who work in Alliance Defends Freedom and would never not want to have Black history in schools or to cut that out, right? So there's that part, but then there's also your Turning Points groups and all that who I can't see myself collaborating with ever because they don't work in good faith and they enable racism and all these other things. So that coalition that they brought together, I think they were going for size, but it really hurts you if you're trying to be seen as legitimate. And the truth of the matter is many of these policies, let me say this again, I don't think this was done secret as in a conspiracy, right? It's planning. This is what think tanks do, okay? But here's the issue. Many of these policies are so extreme, and it's stuff that the extreme kind of right has been talking about for a while, but they're so extreme that your average American probably didn't vote for that and would not want to see it and think it was beneficial for the country. Right? So they kind of got their wish list together, but again, not doing it in a democratic spirit. I don't think they considered everybody don't want a far right agenda when you get in there. Okay? So I'm going to end it with this, and I'm repeating myself because I want to be very clear, because you know how people take clips of this and try to say, slander you one way or the other. Project 2025 is nothing I would ever support. I think it's dangerous. I think it's outside of the spirit of democracy. But what I want to tell you too is I do not think it would I don't think it's Jim Crow 2.0. Many of those things are not unconstitutional that are in it, even though I don't like the expansion of executive powers. And it's not something that I think would simply end democracy and create a dictatorship. That is an overstatement. Doesn't mean that it's good. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't be concerned. But we have to be honest enough and mature enough to draw the line and be charitable enough to accurately depict what somebody's trying to do. Don't like it. I think some of the memes that I've seen have gone too far. Hope that's helpful, y'all. I'll be right back on the Church Politics Podcast.
Your eyes on the times, you walk ready to speak up, but with so many problems, you're exhausted trying to keep up.
This is the Church Politics Podcast, where you can get political commentary from a biblical worldview. We're not trying to be conservative or progressive. We're trying to be Christian in the public square.
And I'm black as heaven. I'm made in God's image. Nobody can change my settings. Hey man, got off my knees and put an end to my search. It's easy to sell your soul when you don't know what it's worth.
And I'm back on the Church Politics Podcast, doing it slow low today. And this is going to be the last segment, but I think it's a very important segment. I don't know if many of you have been paying attention to the controversy that's going on with the National Association of Black Journalists. So they were having an event. They invited both Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, and they invited Trump. According to the Harris campaign, she had a conflict and couldn't make it, right? She wasn't scheduled. Initially, they said, well, we can't be there in person. We like to do it through Zoom. They said, we're not doing Zoom. We need you to do in person. And she couldn't do it. So initially they said, well, you just won't be taking a part in it. Now some are saying they might still do some Zoom after or whatever. I'm not exactly sure where that stands. But what we do know is Kamala decided not to come. Trump accepted the invitation. and he was there yesterday, and they had an interview. Here's where the controversy is. A lot of African American organizations said, and Roland Martin was a big part of this too, that the NABJ should not be interviewing Trump at all. That he's a threat. That all he's going to do is get up there and lie. And so why would you platform him? Is the way that they were saying that. So let me give you my take, right? I agree that Trump is dangerous. Trump has proven not to tell the truth over and over again. I disagree that journalists, this institution of journalists, should not interview him. Okay. And I think that comes from more of a partisan point of view than actually is a point of view that's thinking about journalism. Journalism is about reporting the truth. It's about reporting what's going on, not whether you like it or not. If Trump were just some random guy spewing inaccuracies that nobody really knew and had no impact on anything, yeah, of course you say, man, you ain't got to platform that dude because he ain't. But guess what? Whether you like him or not, almost half the country has voted for him twice in 2 elections. He was the president of the United States. You don't have to like it. You don't have to think he's truthful, but he's a presidential nominee, and people are going to be voting for him. They need to hear what he has to say. And if you think he's going to lie, then you need to call him out on those. But the idea, and I know I have some close friends who disagree with me on this, the idea that somebody can be running for president, that somebody's a former president, and you should not hear what they have to say when you know about half the country is going to be voting for them, does not make sense to me. And I will be honest with you, I think it goes against journalistic ethics. And I think a lot of the people who were saying this weren't thinking about the National Association of Black Journalists. They were being partisan. They were saying, yes, I dislike Trump, but it would be great if we could just deplatform him from everything and nobody would ever have to hear from him again. To me, journalism plays a huge part in democracy. It is undemocratic to have a presidential nominee and tell journalists that they shouldn't interview him, that people shouldn't hear what he has to say. The other thing that does, it just tells me how little faith you have in the people. So you have little faith in the journalists that they would be able to conduct an interview and not call somebody out when they're lying, and also in the people that they wouldn't be able to see through it. Denying people access to information or access to somebody's point of view who's in such a powerful, or might be in a powerful position again, who's been in such a powerful position, is not democratic, is not helping anybody. And here's my other thing. People come from this as, some of the people who are saying this are basically surrogates of campaigns. A lot of these folks are surrogates of the Harris campaign. Of course, they don't want anybody to ever hear anything Trump has to say. But here's my problem with these folks. I mean, that's what partisans are going to do. That's what surrogates are going to do. We know they're going to come from a certain point of view because they want a certain outcome. Here's what really offended me. So we're going to tear down this Black institution, right? The things that people have been saying about the National Association of Black Journalists from inside the community because they interviewed Trump are ridiculous. We're going to tear down this Black institution that has worked so hard to get people in different positions and to give people opportunities, really based on partisanship. Because you're a surrogate for a certain campaign, you don't want Black people to hear what Trump has to say, as if they can't critique what he has to say for themselves. And so you tear down this organization in this partisan partisan effort that you have going on. You don't have to agree with them, but the way people have been trying to discredit this group of Black journalists is ridiculous. And Trump got up there, guess what they did? They questioned him. They gave him some hard questions. He was exposed in certain ways. They did what they were supposed to do. But we got people, because they're so deep into the campaign, that they're going to take down this organization, this black institution, because they didn't do what they wanted them to do. They're working according to journalistic ethics and the purpose of journalism. You don't have to like Trump, but guess what? Half the country voted for him. People need to hear what he has to say. And if he's as bad as we say he is, then when they say it, it's going to turn people off, not turn them to him. What are you afraid of? But to go against what journalists need to be doing, and then to tear down this black organization, this black institution, based on a partisan perspective, carrying the water of the Democratic Party, is wrong. And for all the people that always talk about how black they are, how much they care about black people, but when it comes to politics, when it comes to getting your party or somebody who you think is going to do you a favor in office, you'll tear them down. And that's why I don't even want to hear all this blacker than thou talk all day, because when it comes down to it, many people are just about their interest. You can disagree with them all day. You can come out and say, I disagree with the decision that they made because I think Trump is bad. Great. You don't have to try to attack the credibility and slander the organization because they didn't do what you want them to do. And yet you always calling somebody else out for they not black enough for this reason, they not black enough for that reason. But when your interest gets involved and you want them to do something, you're willing to tear them down. I think a lot of people expose themselves in how they approach the National Association of Black Journalists in this regard. A lot of people expose themselves. And I think people are going to remember what happened here. Disagree all you want, but you better make a good case that journalism demands, the ethics of journalism demand that they don't interview this man who half the country voted for. That's somehow an ethical way to go about it. Y'all didn't make a good case for that, not based on somebody who's already been the president. You ain't got to like him. They're doing what journalists are supposed to do. And because it doesn't fit your agenda, now we're going to tear the whole organization down. I think there's some folks out there that should be ashamed of themselves in that regard. Well, I know that was a little bit heavy, but I appreciate everybody listening in. As you know, as we always say, Ann Kemp, there's a cross that neither political conservatism nor progressivism is fit to bear. There's a civic hearing in need of faithful witnesses who love social justice and won't surrender the truth to be loved by the world. Politic with the boldness and love of Jesus Christ. Until next time, Ann Kemp, we'll holler at you.
Your eyes on the times, you walk ready to speak up. But with so many problems, you're exhausted trying to keep up.
This is the Church Politics Podcast, where you can get political commentary from a biblical worldview. We're not trying to be conservative or progressive. We're trying to be Christian in the public square.
And I'm black as heaven. I'm made in God's image. Nobody can change my settings. Hey man, got off my knees and put an end to my search. It's easy to sell your soul when you don't know what it's worth.